Come on in, Clark County. It's Rob Anderson with Reform Clark County. And this week, we're going to take a look at a week that was wild at the Clark County Council. I mean, they covered fireworks, which we weren't sure if fireworks were going to be a part of the 2026 season or the 250th anniversary for our country as we celebrate. And also the GMA, the Growth Management Act that shapes the next 20 years of growth in Clark County. That was a nail biter. And we're going to take a closer look at something that happened last week at the Charter Review. I shared a little bit about it, but it deserves a closer look. But before we do, hey, hit the like button, the share, give a comment, give me some tips on some issues in Clark County. And if you want, you can also support the show by going to givesendgo.com, Reform Clark County. So this last week, the Clark County Council made a big decision regarding the Growth Management Act. Now, that's something that most of us probably, don't know what it's about, don't want to know what it's all about, because it takes a year of process of meetings and state regulations, and it is a very difficult kind of process. But it all came to a head in two meetings this last week, a Monday night meeting and Tuesday night meeting, in which finally the Clark County Council made the decision of how Clark County is going to grow in the next 20 years. And what they decided, there was three options available. Number one was a very restrictive no growth policy. So I can't even imagine people that would want to have something like that, because that would increase housing costs dramatically in Clark County. Just imagine supply and demand shows that as population grows in the next 20 years, I mean, if there's not more land available for development, that would make affordability. If you think it's bad now, and it's definitely getting bad, it would be tremendously worse with the option A, which Sue Marshall and Will Fuentes voted for, but we'll get into that in a few minutes. But option three, which was a really high growth, kind of proposal that would allow a lot of development, and then option B, which is what the council voted for, was a compromise kind of position where it would allow cities such as Richfield and Battleground and some others, Camas, be able to expand and for them to make those kind of decisions that are needed for those cities. And Councilor Little, Young, and Belcott voted for that, to the chagrin of Marshall and Fuentes, which Fuentes took to Facebook afterwards and said, "I did not vote for option B," because they want to have restrictive growth management. They want to have basically no growth, which would again affect affordability dramatically in Clark County. And what gets me is you see these signs around Clark County. You hear Democrat Party talk about affordability and that they're for housing, affordable housing. But they make decisions like this. They make decisions about raising property taxes year after year after year. And then, hey, let's restrict growth so that there's the supply and demand, and it's going to make housing way more expensive. They vote for that. But yet they're hoping that voters are dumb enough not to pay attention to these kind of votes with GMA or property taxes and connect the dots. That's what they're hoping for. I believe that voters are smart and we'll kind of see through this and say, no thanks. We're tired of you talking about affordability, but not really doing anything to help affordability. So GMA, that's in the books now, and we'll be able to kind of move forward with this, which was an incredible amount of time and effort, but we're ready to move on in Clark County to 2045. Another issue that the Clark County Council tackled, like in fact the next day, so Monday, Tuesday, GMA, very intense, lots of public comment, finally made a decision on that. The next day was fireworks in the Clark County Council meeting room. Not literally, but that was the discussion point because Sue Marshall, once again, has decided in her infinite wisdom, and Will Fuentes along with her, that the little people should be banned of fireworks. Now, they're smart enough that they've come up with this safe and sane scheme, which is a scheme because it would restrict fireworks sales by probably 95%. And when you restrict something 95%, it's an effective ban, even though they're able to escape that kind of scrutiny and language and basically say, oh, this isn't a ban. It's a ban. It was a ban, safe and sane policy, which someone brought up what a clever ploy this is that, well, I guess if you're for or if you're against safe and sane, you must be insane. You must be unsafe. See how that works? But that's not the truth. In fact, the truth is that last year regarding fireworks, the number of instances were way down. It was far more safer year, even though it was pretty dry conditions. But Sue Marshall, in her desire to control things, brought this issue before the Clark County Council. Now, a couple, 2-3 weeks ago, they tried, but Glen Yung wasn't there. It was only 4 people. It was a deadlock, and so they waited for a full council regiment. And so here it was this Wednesday. The issue came back up, and the room was packed. I was so proud of all the people that showed up because when things come up during this council time meeting, this is the best time to really block something strategically. So, for example, if it had advanced, if there would have been 3 counselors to move it forward, so now you're trying to get someone to reverse their vote as it goes into a council meeting, official council meeting, where they make the official decision and vote. So this was the best time, and a group of people organized, and it was a group effort, and the room was packed mostly with people who support fireworks, who did not want this safe and sane policy, which was just a ruse for another word for banning. And so the room was filled, and people gave really good comments. There was a few that were a little emotional, but for the most part, people gave really good comments in support. There were a handful of people that were for the safe and sane scheme. And in the end, I got to give a huge hat tip, of course, to Councilor Belcott, who's always been firm on this issue. Matt Little made probably the strongest comment and just kind of made this not on my watch comment. Take a listen.
So anyway, I'm here for 3 more years. If I have your trust, I hopefully will be here longer, but there will not be a ban on my watch if I can.
So that was very clear. Matt Little, not on my watch. I love it, that kind of comment. And so it really came down to one other vote. Glen Yung, who gave a 10-minute, not sure, in typical Glen Yung fashion, not sure. It's almost like roulette a lot of times, where we're just not going to sure where this is going to land. It could be black, could be red. We don't know. Often with Glen Yung, that's the problem of just not knowing where he's going to be. Fortunately, when the ball finally dropped on this, it dropped in the favor of keeping fireworks legal. But he made the unwise decision to kind of keep this issue alive by sending it to staff to maybe take a look at safe and sane. That would be a better compromise. So unfortunately, this is most likely going to come back next year, or maybe later this year after 4th of July. I doubt that it will come back up before 4th of July, since we're already, a lot of wheels are in motion, and 250th anniversary of our country. But I think there's some Democrats out there who would love to kind of rain on that parade and kind of tamp it down a little bit, the patriotism. But we'll keep an eye on it, and we're grateful that that people showed up, people spoke up, and voices were heard. And I have no doubt that if the room was the other way around, if most of the people there wanted the ban, I'm not sure how Glen Yung would have voted. I've seen it where then he capitulates and folds and goes with the crowd that's there present. So very important that you show up, that you speak up, that you stay engaged, don't give up. And on this issue was a big win this week. So we're getting closer to filing week. That's a week in May, the first full week in May, where candidates who are going to run for office, they file with the auditor's office, with the state's office actually, through the auditor's office. And so in the next coming weeks, we're going to see some interesting developments. We'll see some candidates. Some candidates have already announced their intentions, but I'm sure we'll have some surprises. We'll see some names that maybe we didn't expect. But if you are thinking about running for office, maybe you should get a hold of me and contact me at rob@reformclarkcounty.com. I would love to talk to you, hear your thoughts, what you might be thinking, and see what we can do to maybe help, because I believe that people should be engaged. People should be running for office or considering it in a smart and strategic way. So we'll keep an eye on filing week that's coming up real soon. So the last thing that I want to bring up is last week I shared with you a clip that Glen Yung came to the Charter Review Commission, gave comments, and said that he was strongly against a proposal for a supermajority requirement for property taxes. Of course, not a big surprise, since Glen Yung has voted every year to raise property taxes. But something caught my eye about his comments. So he gave an explanation of why he was against the supermajority requirement, and this is what he said.
So 2608, supermajority requirement for taxes. This is my number one issue. I strongly oppose it. I know that in this room, there's a lot of talk about making sure that law enforcement is funded. This is our single biggest tool to do it, other than major tax increases. The reason that we have such a dearth in our sheriff's office is because we're limited to the 1%, and there have been times in the past when the council has elected not to take that 1%.
So I don't know if you caught that or not, but Glen Yung comes to the Charter Review and says, "Oh, I can't support this supermajority requirement to raise property taxes because we need that revenue for public safety, for law enforcement, for all these things." But the problem is that his voting record shows that he refused to do it. When opportunities came before the Clark County Council, when Sheriff John Horch came before the county council and said this.
Historically, about 25 years ago, Sheriff Lucas had mentioned to the council, there's several videos of it out there. We're not going to play it today. He says, "Hey, we're not keeping up with population at the sheriff's office. We need to do something." And almost every year, every other year, they said, "We'll get back to you next year. We'll get back to you next year." And it's never been corrected. So this has been isn't a current issue. It's been building and building and building, but we're at a crisis now, and for a variety of reasons. So our staffing is way below what it should be, and it has been. Last year, I presented 4 or 5 times to the council requests for staffing, and unfortunately, none of them were approved. But 2025, a new council, and we're at it again here. Something has to change. So
Glen Yung didn't do anything. Glen Yung wouldn't provide general budget funds for additional deputy roles and positions. He wouldn't do it. The sheriff, as I explained last week, had to basically come around with this sales tax increase because counselors like Glen Yung, Sue Marshall, Will Fuentes will not give money out of the general budget for more deputy positions. They've refused to do it. And Glen Yung has had 3 years, and he has shown a pattern in which he's just not willing to do it. But he says he's all for, law enforcement. He's all for public safety. In fact, that's why we got to make it easier to raise people's taxes, because we need that money for it. Oh, by the way, I'm not going to spend it on it. That's the reality. And it's very important for us to kind of pay attention to these kind of things, especially as we go into election year. So that is Reformcast episode 11 for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. Please hit the like, the share, tell your friends and neighbors about this, hopefully so that they can stay informed. And if you want to help this continue, please hit or go and support the show by going to givesendgo.com, Reform Clark County, and you can support the show with little or a lot. It goes a long ways. Or send me an email at rob@reformclarkcounty.com and give me a tip or comments. Tell me what you think, or if there's issues that you have insight on and you want me to maybe take a closer look at something. So remember, you are the catalyst of reform with God's help. See you next week.